You can see the participants coming in. It's kind of fun to watch the participant thing get bigger and bigger.
Oh, is that attendees? Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, hi guys. Hi everybody. Thank you for coming to this webinar. I really appreciate it. We're gonna give everyone a minute or two to get, just to get logged on, make sure everything's good. If you're an attendee, you've been muted. And I'll talk about this in a minute. There's a Q&A. You can type in your questions. So if you have additional questions or anything as we're going along. I also want to let people know that when you type in question, if you want to, like for us, you should be able to see some of our names. And this I just learned today that in Zoom, you can click on your name in the corner and change your name if you want. So that, to me, that was a good Zoom thing to know, not just for this, but if you're going to do any of the other AXYS events, that'll be great. So if you wanted to just change your name, put in your initials, or I was going to be Buffy or something, I thought that might be fun. So we can just to have a little fun with this. So just thanks. I want to thank everyone for coming to this. I think it's wonderful. This is an AXYS webinar, and it's just really exciting for us to be here. And it came about when we were on a support group leader meeting, and I just want to thank everyone who leads an AXYS support group, because what you do is really what AXYS is all about. So thank you to the women on the call and everyone else who does that. So I'm Carol Mershart. I'm the AXYS Executive Director. And you can find us at genetic.org if you don't know. So we're doing this webinar. We are recording this webinar. So that way, if you get interrupted or some people who couldn't come, they can come see it later. I also wanted to let you know, so again, if you're coming in, you're muted so that we don't talk over each other, but feel free to type in things. There's a Q&A box. You can type in the questions and we'll be pausing and going through and answering those. But I know a lot of you, and thank you so much for doing this, filled out our Survey Monkey, and that really helped us plan this event. We were able to see who's coming, and our 3 presenters tonight took all of your questions and put them together and decided how they're going to try to help in the best they can. So thank you to everyone doing it. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our speakers. We have Dorothy and Erin and Hannah is going to start us off. They're going to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going ahead and getting the PowerPoint up and running. For some reason, it's starting in the middle. Sorry. Okay. Is that looking okay, everyone?
Yes, you're good.
Looks great.
Okay, great. So we put this webinar together. It's called School's Out, Now What? I think all of us are in a similar position. Sorry, this is going to be weird. From my end, it's not letting me scroll through as fluidly as I'd like. But I'm Hannah. This is, I'm an educational psychologist and behavior analyst, and I help run the support group in Northern California. And on the left is a picture of me and my family at Disneyland a year back, different time. And on the right is my daughter, Lucia. She's 10 and a half and has trisomy X. And let me see if we're gonna be able to get through these guys. Okay, go ahead, Erin.
Okay, my name is Erin Frith. I am an English and special education teacher. I've taught in both middle and high school. There's us on our quarantined walk in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and then that's my daughter Violet on the right. She is 8 3/4. Very important.
Sorry, this is not, it's not letting me scroll. So I'm just gonna, I'm not really sure. I miss Dorothy's. There's Dorothy.
There you are.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Dorothy Boothe. I don't know if you can see me okay, but I'm a parent of a 21-year-old son who is XXY. This is a picture of my family at Glacier National Park, Montana last summer on a family vacation. And then you might see a picture of my son to the right on his 21st birthday last month. And he is currently in college. And he's been through about every kind of schooling you can imagine, public, private, virtual, and homeschool. So I'm glad to join y'all and hope I can help y'all any way possible. And I also lead the AXYS Southeastern Support Group.
So one option is for me to restart how my sharing is going, because this is going to be annoying, but it's not letting me control very well. So here's, but I'll hold off in a second.
Okay. So we wanted to take a second to clarify the different buzzwords that are going around, because we think that there's an important distinction between something that we're calling distance learning or virtual learning and homeschooling. So right now, distance learning is what a lot of people are experiencing for the first time, or virtual learning. Those are kind of interchangeable terms, but it's school systems using online resources to provide instruction. So some systems did this before the pandemic. Think of online college courses. Dorothy will probably share later that her son attended a virtual program for a while, I believe. So, but a lot of schools are kind of building the plane in the air, so to speak, with their distance or virtual learning.
Okay, and for homeschooling, this is a totally different type of schooling. This is parent chosen and directed. Basically, the parent has the option of choosing curriculum. That can be a plus for people with disabilities, and there's different materials available for that. The parents can choose, and it's directed. It doesn't always have to be parent taught. There's a lot of homeschooling co-ops and even online schooling now that parents don't actually have to be the teacher, but they're the one that's directing their child's education. But it is supposed to fall under the requirements and guidelines of each state. For example, I live in Georgia. Our requirements for homeschooling, which I did for my son his last 2 years of high school, where we have to submit paperwork for, it's online actually, paperwork or intent to homeschool. We have to provide, sometimes if they ask, types of schoolwork that they've done, test scores, which are usually every 3 years, and completion of requirements for very important milestones like graduation from high school. So this is a totally different type of schooling than what most of you are probably currently experiencing. So we want to make sure that you knew the difference between these different types of learning.
So I'm just going to share so that hopefully we can go through this a little easier with changing these slides, but I think it's not going to let us. So one of the big kind of things that we saw in your responses were kind of some questions about what am I doing wrong? And we want, our objective of this webinar is really to kind of, and Q&A is going to be to let you know that the answer is nothing. You're actually doing everything right. And this is a really trying time. So we're going to talk a little bit about all those things and have some pointers for you. And we also want this to be interactive. And so Dorothy, Erin, and Carol are moderating the chat. And if you do have questions as we go through, feel free to put them in, and they'll be kind of pausing and making sure that we can respond to those. And we're also going to try to be intentional to honor those of you who sent us questions beforehand, and we're going to try to answer those. And those are embedded as we go along. So school's out, we're all feeling overwhelmed and stressed with, this incredible trying time. We also have children that have special needs, and maybe a lot of other things are going on as well. So our jobs may be in flux. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so one big idea that we'd like you to have is that right now, to something that we can do to help ourselves is to just accept the situation and simplify what we're doing or what our expectations are. It doesn't mean forget everything, but we do want to make sure that our standards or our idea of what we should be doing is really matching where we're at, which is we're in a worldwide pandemic. And I think about, my own practice as an educational psychologist, and then as a mom, and now as trying to also school my children or help support their learning, and they both have learning disabilities, and I feel like I can't do any of those well. And, you know, there's some self-statements that can be helpful. And rather than feeling like, yes, I should be able to do every single one of my roles, you know, as well as I would before this time, you know, it can be helpful to tell yourself, I'm not homeschooling in the way that it was because there was all kinds of other supports, right? I'm doing my best to help my kids learn at home during a crisis. Or I'm not working from home, and as if that was it, right? I'm doing my best to work at home during a crisis while doing other things. You know, and then just reminding yourself, you can't be as productive as you would be in normal times. Your children are not going to be able to be as productive as they were when they were in school. You know, really, it can be a really helpful strategy just to think about what is my goal for the next 24 hours or for the next hour, because that is something that we can kind of hold on to at this time. It's hard to see past that. So accept and simplify. So the next big idea is, you know, to kind of think about what our routines are and our structure is. Keep calm and structure on. You know, Erin, I know, is laughing because we all had a discussion beforehand. You know, this is like one of the cornerstones that you'll see in the literature. If you Google COVID-19, what do I do for my kids? Everything says, get a schedule, create a structure. And we all tried that. And,
detailed,
you know, the
Facebook posts, and then
yeah, the first,
like what's half an hour do this, and then the next half an hour do this.
Yeah. The first 2 weeks, you know, we did 5 different modifications of different schedules, and trying to make them visual and all beyond this, and it was kind of a disaster in our family as well. But I think that the main point behind why people are saying to do a schedule is just because for all of us, some type of routine or predictability can be calming. And at the same time, you know, if you're noticing that your kids are resisting it or it's not feeling well, you know, you can also let yourself know now is not the time to like clamp down and try to control the day. It's not going to go well. And, you know, when we talk about schedules, maybe a schedule is not going to be scheduling every hour. Maybe it's going to be scheduling like something fun for some point in your week or in your day, or thinking about, you know, what can we take out that's not working, and what are the things that we are going to do that are working. It's not your job to have an 8-hour scheduled school day and hold on to that while you're doing all the other things that you're having to do as a parent, like cleaning the house and taking care of other things and paying bills and possibly working, running after several kids, having, you know, family members doing things. And so, you know, at this point, some of the routines might be as simple as sitting down together to have dinner, or sitting down together to have breakfast, and just having points of connection during your day. I always feel really impressed with myself if we make it to dinner and there's something on the table. Yes.
I can't imagine everybody being ready for breakfast at the same time. Like, that's a whole different.
Yes. And then the last big idea that I'm going to talk about is just, you know, kind of thinking about that our children, your young adults, our family members will be protected if they are connected. And so we want to support connection and emotional regulation. And that is not easy right now. I think all of us are feeling more stress, possibly anxiety with all the uncertainty that's happening and changes in our own routines. And so one big message is just to prioritize your own self-care, and know that when your child is having behaviors that are, you know, upsetting, or, you know, they're expressing their upset through their behaviors, that's the way the child's expressing that perhaps their coping skills are being exceeded by the situation. And it's a way of expressing that they're having a hard time. In general, kids do as well as they can, and we do as well as we can. And when we're out of resources or coping skills, we start seeing behaviors. And, you know, I think just know that, like, through your own self-regulation and through, like, what does that mean? Dorothy's gonna talk about that in a minute. It's not an easy thing. You know, we're all gonna, one of the main things that we're working on right now, I think, as a family, is just connection and emotional regulation. And you're not gonna be able to learn or do anything else without that piece there. Okay, so now I'm gonna pass it to Dorothy.
Thank you, Hannah. So one of the most important things for you to remember, since Hannah's already talked about this, is your priorities are really something that you should pay attention to, because everyone's probably trying to tell you, or you're reading, do this, do that, do this, do that. But look at the first things first. And the first priority really should be self-care, which is you taking care of yourself first before caring for the rest of your family. And I know, I noticed that there were some people that in here are grandmothers that are actually teaching grandchildren. So we've got people, grandmothers, mothers. I noticed some people mentioned they have their own health issues. Someone has cancer, or you have a disability yourself. You and your spouse may both be working from home. That's a lot for you to handle, but you need to take care of yourself first. And my husband works for Delta Airlines, and I think most of you probably flown in an airplane at some point in time and heard a flight attendant say, or maybe you've seen the videos, the oxygen mask will drop down in case of an emergency. And in case that happens, you put it on yourself first before you help someone else. It might be a child, it might be an older adult, but why do you put it on yourself first? Well, if you're incapacitated, you can't help anyone else. And so I think for mothers, it's really hard. We think it's selfish if we do something for ourselves, but it's really crucial that we pay attention to what we need first so we can help our family do better during this time. And so one of the things you can do is choose a self-care practice for you to do regularly. And that's something that only you can decide for yourself, what you think might help you best. So as Hannah mentioned, you can stay regulated emotionally and help the rest of your family. It may be as simple as keeping a gratitude journal, writing down things that you're thankful for. There's always good things amidst the difficulties. And I think that's one thing that's was helpful to me when I was caring for my mother before she died of cancer. And I actually was homeschooling my son at that point in time and had another child in school. But you choose something that helps you to be the best you. And not only are you doing that for yourself, but when you're doing that, you're actually modeling it for your child or your children. So they know better how to cope. Maybe they find something, maybe it's art that they like to do, or deep breathing, or something that helps them. They can learn how to self-regulate better. But remember that being the best you will help you best help your family in return. So that should be the first priority. The second priority is your family's stability. And the health and safety needs of your family really should come first. We'll talk about education next. But really, if your family's not well, if they're not healthy, if they don't feel safe, your children can't learn in that type of an environment. And so look for those needs to be met first before you look to meet educational needs. There is a psychological, maybe Hannah can expound on this, but there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't meet basic physiological needs first, you really can't meet other needs that are emotional or higher than that. And so think of that first. You know, is your child well? Do they have, are they hungry or thirsty, or do they need something else in order for them to even be able to learn? And they will also learn better if they stay connected to us. And so if we can be self-regulated by prioritizing our needs first, then we can help them to self-regulate, and that will help them better to learn. So in the next slide, hopefully Hannah can, there we go. The third priority is education. So actually this would be behind your self-care and your family stability. And so what are the goals of the education while your children are at home with you? For those of you that have an IEP for your child, I noticed that I think about half of the people have it and half don't. If you don't know what that is, an individualized education plan, you can ask for that through your school district. And if you don't have it now, you can even request that, or you can pay for it privately. But in an IEP, for those of you who have it, you should already have goals for your child for this year. And those would be a good thing for you to focus on and what's important for your child to learn. I saw many people saying that there's teachers giving lots of busy work or too many things for you to keep up with. So determine what is really important for those goals that you already have for your child. If you don't know what those are, then you can reach out to your school personnel, the general ed teacher or special education teacher, to determine what it is that the most important thing for them to be learning from some of the materials they may be having to work on, and also to get support. I was reading that several people that responded said they're not getting support, that many of the school personnel they probably don't even know themselves what to do at this point, and they're having to juggle a lot themselves. But reach out to them to get support if you don't know what your child really needs to focus on. And one of the things that you could do is ask for modified work assignments. And that may be already in an IEP. And that is for a child, sometimes you're just, in younger grades, you're given a lot of work that may not necessarily everything have to be completed. For example, my son, when he was in elementary school, he was dysgraphic, so he struggled with handwriting. And for spelling, he'd have to write spelling words in different colors and different shapes. And the point was, does he have to write? Because it takes 2 hours for him to finish an assignment. So what was the goal? Was if it's to learn the word, he didn't have to write it 1,000 times. So determine what's the most important thing for your child to be doing. And if your child needs additional instruction past this school year, which I don't know in different parts of the country, I know here in Georgia, our school districts are finishing in 2 weeks. Others won't be done until June. But if your child needs more instruction, you can ask for extended school year. That may already be in an IEP, but if not, you can request that. And it seems like it may be appropriate because during this time, you may feel your child hasn't gotten everything they needed. And during that ESY time, they could get more instruction before school starts again in the fall. And the last thing really is to trust your intuition. As a parent, you know your child better than anyone else. So don't second guess yourself or say, why am I doing this wrong? Realize that you're the one that knows better than anyone else about your child. So.
Are there any questions, those of you moderating the chat, that you think we should address before we move forward?
Not yet. There have only been a
Okay.
couple, and I'm
Okay.
trying
So, so what we've done is we've kind of just like try to plant some big ideas, right? That we want to take care of yourself first, and, you know, really prioritize what's important to you and your family. And I thought it was really interesting, you know, when I saw Dorothy put in their priority number 3 is education, you know, and I really agree with that. And feel like sometimes when we're feeling anxious, there can be this moment where our mind jumps to education, rather than, you know, wait, I haven't gone on a run today and I really need to go on a run to feel okay. Or wait, we haven't done anything fun in several days and we need to have that. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the most common questions, and I'm struggling with these slides, you guys. So just a second. Everyone's getting a nice preview of our slides. I don't know. We practice this.
I feel better that like their question is there. We're coming.
It's coming. It won't let me go past this one. Oh my God. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and so one question, and maybe Erin and Dorothy see it.
Like 15 questions.
Yeah. The biggest theme actually that we saw was around motivation. And how do I motivate my child? My child's not motivated. What can I do to increase motivation? My kids completely stop doing work or won't even log in. So there was, you know, a pretty big range. And, you know, I can share that as a parent, I'm seeing that issue with both of my students, my children. It's funny that I say student. So First off, I think I also consult at a lot of schools and work with students with IEPs, and we're seeing this everywhere. And
Absolutely.
it goes back to the first point of like reducing our productivity standards. Children with executive functioning deficits, with ADHD, with learning disabilities are particularly finding this time challenging. And we're seeing that many students, if not the majority of them, are having less mental resources to put into getting work done, because it's taking so much extra work to just get on the computer, to log in, to try to do this from home with everything else that's going on. And so just know you're not alone, and that maybe it's kind of normal to be struggling with motivation. At the same time, we want to think about, is this a skill deficit? Like, is my child struggling with motivation because it's so hard for them to do the work? Like, one thing I've seen is really long Zoom meetings. And for kids that struggle with attention, it's going to be really hard to sit there for an hour and a half, and attend to a Zoom meeting. So when they're not motivated to log in, part of the question is, well, they may want to, but it's really hard to do it. Or is the academic content mismatched, or is it just that they need to earn something fun afterwards? So I'm always thinking, is there, what's the reason, right? What's this avoidance behavior trying to communicate? We want to pick a realistic goal and have it be achievable, or else the motivation is really going to go down. So in general, we want to make sure that whatever goal we're setting with our child is achievable for them and not too high. It's achievable during a pandemic, not necessarily achievable as it would have been before the pandemic. You'll see this everywhere. We want to minimize distractions in the environment. We'll do that as best we can, but it obviously, not having a workspace makes it harder. And one strategy that comes from the behavior world is offering choice as much as possible to increase motivation. So with teenagers, really collaboratively offering that choice can increase the motivation of you have this to do and this to do. When do you want to do them? Or here's some things this week. What do you want to work on today? Or even restructuring the entire assignment to be aligned with the child's interests can add motivation. So maybe writing a paragraph about something is really boring, but if it has to do with Harry Potter or about a certain video game, it's going to be more motivating and doable. So that's a fine thing to ask the teacher if you can do. And I would kind of advocate for that kind of thing if motivation's the issue. And then, often students will see a lack of motivation when the task is overwhelming or there's too many steps. And so as much as we can break things down into really manageable steps, that can help. And also another principle is really interspersing fun and easy things throughout their day. And what I see with both of my children is that everything is hard. At least everything that's coming from the school is feeling hard. And so we're really cutting down on almost everything. And, this is, I don't know if this sounds like blasphemy, but my 7th grader, is struggling to the point that, we picked 2 classes to really focus on out of her 6 classes.
As a teacher,
she chose them.
Okay. Not blasphemy at all.
Yeah, and even that, we're like, but she chose the classes that were the most meaningful to her, where she felt most connected with the teachers, and then we're still kind of modifying what that is and making sure there's something fun, in every day to the best we can. And then sometimes it also can help with motivation if there's some kind of carrot afterwards. So, really structuring the less preferred thing before the more preferred thing. So if there's an activity that your child loves, say, as soon as you get this done, we can do that. Okay, do you guys want to add anything to this?
as a teacher, these are awesome, and I'm going to get into a little bit more of them later, but I just wanted to let you know that from me at least, and I certainly don't represent all teachers, but as a high school teacher, it's not blasphemy to focus on one class. If you're a really strong math student and you feel like, or your kid's a really strong math student, then don't worry about math. If they struggle with writing, which is my daughter's struggle, and as an English teacher, I'm like, I can help you, but you won't let me, and we'll get to that later too. That's the thing that she needs to work on. And as both a parent and a teacher, I would want her to focus on the things that I feel like she will continue to struggle with when they get back to school.
And there's a student that I'm consulting with right now that has turned off to almost all of his classes, and math is his strong one, and that's what we're starting with.
Cool.
Just to get the behavior, just to get him feeling good, right? So it's really up to people that care about your child, you, maybe their teacher, to figure out what's going to work. Okay, so here's another question that we saw a lot of, was just kind of, how do I keep my child on task and less distracted? And this is kind of similar to the motivation. You want to get them motivated first, but now they're on task and we're seeing that they're distracted. And so, we have a few pointers, but we can talk more about that if there's questions. Just some general principles would be to provide the organized workspace, so there's just not distractions there. Make sure that, if your child had fidgets at school and they were helpful, you might want to have something like that at home. And I've seen that students with ADHD symptoms, do better with headphones if they're distracted by noises easily, and just making sure they're in a space that works, or limiting access to cell phones or other technology if they're trying to get work done. With teenagers, you're going to get into a power struggle, so I would definitely think we'd take probably a different approach. Use of visual timers is something that I often come back to, just as a way to kind of help your child understand the passage of time. And so you can do something like, let's work for, show 5 minutes, and then we're going to get up and come show me, and so you're breaking the task up and giving them a really concrete endpoint. Those work best when there's a sound that beeps at the end. And it kind of gives them a cue of how long they're having to do this for. And we just want to make sure everyone's getting movement. I'm struggling with this with my daughter with trisomy X, because she doesn't want to exercise or get out of the house, and motor skills are a little harder for her. But it's really important for brain and for attention to have some movement or outdoor time. And then we want to make sure that our work periods are just not too long. And so she will write her teacher after about 20 minutes and ask if she can take a break during these Zoom things, and then she's allowed some break time. And sometimes we just end it after 45 minutes because that's a lot of time to sit. Erin, do you have something to say about that?
I have more later. It's definitely,
you'll talk about that later.
The achievable end, I think, is so important. Is you're going to do this and you're going to stop when you get to this point, and we're going to take a break. And I need that too. I'm going to grade this assignment, and then I'm going to go get another cup of coffee. I think as parents, you can see how this applies to how you have to break down tasks for yourself too. I have to scrub the toilet. You still have to do it.
I found that instead of a lot of these open-ended online things that we're getting from the school, I just ended up writing them saying we're doing some short worksheets because she does better with that. And that's what it is. If she can see that there's an end at the end of the sheet, she'll do it. But if we're online on some big Google Doc and there's just this unlimited space to write, it's harder. Okay, now tell me, you guys, if I'm gonna skip too many things here. Let's see. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about getting more support from the school. I think, did we skip the whole emotional regulation section?
Did we
It's
move
going to be
it?
after. I think it's going to be
We moved
after
it
this.
again.
We moved it.
Okay, so Dorothy talked a lot about this already. The previous slide, I think, was just like, who do you talk to at your school? So if you're in elementary school, you would start probably with your child's primary classroom teacher and then move to a guidance counselor or higher up if you needed to. If they have a case manager for their IEP, their special education case manager. In middle and high schools, it gets a little trickier because you tend to have more teachers. So if it's a specific teacher that's really just piling on the work and your kid doesn't understand, absolutely get in touch with that individual teacher. And then high schools and middle schools all run differently. So where I teach, a guidance counselor would be a good point of contact to coordinate with a group of teachers. But there's also in my school an academic dean who can also like be a point of contact to get in touch with multiple teachers and come up with a plan. Or again, if your child has an IEP, the special education case manager is a good person to be like, hey, we're really overwhelmed, help. That's partly of their job. So, all right. And then the next one, yay. So Dorothy mentioned that, yes, you can ask for an emergency IEP. There will not be testing to qualify. I think, Hannah, you mentioned that you can, well, maybe it was in our other chat, that you can just say, hey, we think that my child has this learning disability. Can we please have accommodations for that? You can absolutely ask for modified assignments or make them yourself. Like Hannah was saying, we're not going to do this huge Google Doc. We're going to do the same type of assignment, but it's going to be on a worksheet. I have done that for my child. I've just said, well, we're not doing this. We're going to do something that's similar, but it's going to hit the same points, but it's not this huge overwhelming thing, which kind of goes along with that idea of reduced work. So I'm thinking of like a high school algebra class where a kid gets 30 practice problems. Do they need to do 30? Probably not. So ask the teacher, what are the 5 questions that my child needs to do to show you that they understand? Because they're not doing 30. And I think now that a lot of teachers are very receptive to that, because I mean, I have 100 students and I know that they can't, like some of them just can't. So additional individualized instruction. So Hannah, you mentioned your daughter would be overwhelmed in a large Zoom meeting. There'd be like way too much going on. Teachers are happy to spend like 5-10 minutes on a Zoom or we do Google Hangouts. IEP special ed people can help with that too. I know a lot of people in the survey said that they were getting individualized instruction from services at school. Like my daughter gets speech for half an hour every week, which is not very much, but whatever, it's a different story. And then again, we talked about assessing those, like what is the priority? If we're gonna move to the next grade, what do we need to show that our student is proficient in this skill? We don't need to do a 25-page essay. Can we write down an outline? We don't need to write out the whole thing. Can we do 5 math problems instead of 30? And I think there is a lot of flexibility as long as the teacher has the ability to be flexible within the curriculum that their school district provides them.
There's also, we're going to be sending out a resource document for you guys that we put together that has like a lot of resources in like each of these areas. And one thing that has come out just a few days ago was a request for an IEP to discuss like the interim distance learning plan for your child. And there's a sample template that's in our resources that we'll send out where you can request that and kind of get together with the different people that work with your child to kind of figure out how can we adjust things to make it work better. Okay, so the next section was just about a lot of questions about, you know, just extreme frustration and children feeling really emotional. And then of course we do. And I think one of the more eye-opening things for me as a parent is just seeing how hard my children are working and how hard this is for them. And, you know, it tugs on your heartstrings. And also it's like, what do I do? You know, and like, no matter what, I'm doing all those things on Hannah and Erin and Dorothy's checklist, and my kids still won't log in. Or
I'm
they're
doing
getting
all the
really
things
frustrated.
I'm doing all the
I'm
things on the
slamming there.
checklist. And as a teacher, I'm struggling. Like my kid will not write. You give her a paragraph to write, and we had tears. Like she put her head down on top of her laptop and cried. So you are not alone.
Yeah, we all want to normalize that no matter how many tricks you think you have up your sleeve, you know, this is very humbling experience of just, you know, this is really hard. And it's kind of like this big experiment. There's not any clear right way to be doing pandemic schooling. And, you know, we're same with parenting. And, you know, and what we do see though is that when our kids are getting really frustrated or emotional, to me, that the message is this is really hard for them. So we saw that kind of question. So how do I intervene before learning becomes? So, you know, that kind of goes back to just how do we modify things and structure the tasks so that they're more doable. But also, I've seen some parents create kind of like a toolbox around before the child becomes emotional, you know, just with their kids of like, hey, what can we do when things are going to get hard? And like working out a break system with the teacher. Like when I get frustrated, instead of going under the table or slamming my computer down, I'm going to go like this, you know, and that means I'm taking a break. And so sometimes some of that pre-work, if we're seeing a pattern of something that's frustrating and then thinking like, hey, what could we do instead? Sometimes we can collaboratively come up with another way of coping. Not that it will always work, but, and then another one was when approaching a task that you know is hard for your child and often causes behaviors, you know, how do you start the task and avoid and decrease behaviors to get the task done? So it's kind of like the same type of thing, right? We're going to try to break it down, pre-teach if possible, but also know that it also could just be that it's like way overwhelming, or maybe we're just tired. We've done too much Zoom for one day.
Did we get hangry? Do we need a snack?
Or we're just feeling not good.
Right.
So the other kind of things is, you know, what if we're seeing our child's like saying it's all my fault and crying, or a lot of really negative comments like I suck, I'm stupid, I want to die, you know, I hate this is horrible, or even more extreme behaviors. And so, you know, I think that we have a few pointers for just supporting emotional regulation, and we have a ton of stuff in our handout in the resource that will talk more about that. Sorry, guys. We also want to really be thinking about mental health. So some of the basic strategies, you know, that people, the first kind of core cornerstones we'd go back to was, you know, as parents, we can name the emotion. And sometimes by naming it, it helps your child regulate. And then really validate that they're having big feelings, or that, you know, they're really frustrated and this is really hard. So naming it and validating it is usually the first step, rather than focusing still on the assignment. Because once the emotions spike, the parts of the brain that would do that higher level thinking that we need for learning aren't really going to be working. So our job is to try to kind of just help the child regulate back down into a place where they can eventually reapproach learning.
Just really quickly, guys, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A section. We are happy to jump in on those. I just wanted to remind everybody that that was a possibility.
Yeah, we don't really want to talk the whole time.
I know, but we're getting
but we are.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So, yeah. And we can also unmute you if you want to share your question verbally. But we just need to see that. So, and then, you know, some of us have used like visual supports to help, like a calming chart or a picture of emotions. And so sometimes if our kids have some speech issues, when they get upset, it's harder to access those words. And so it can be easier to point or to look. And breaks are okay. You know, that's a real valid way to, to manage things. And then what we wanted to just also share is that for students, like for our kids who are already at higher risk of anxiety and depression and some other types of mental health things just because of their chromosome variation, or maybe are already struggling with anxiety or depression or social skills issues, this type of stressor can just really bring some of that out more. And so there is, you know, some emerging literature that kids that already were struggling with depression now because of the social isolation are struggling more. And so we want to be monitoring, you know, those types of signs and really, you know, looking for support if we're needing it, because this is a lot to, you know, have on your shoulders as a parent. And even if you haven't sought out mental health support prior to this, there are a lot of like telehealth type things where you can get support either through your insurance, through the school counselor, you know, and then privately. Also the support group leaders from AXYS, you know, are all wanting to support as well and would probably, you know, welcome phone calls. Okay, so we did that. So we're up to the last question or two. One was, who is going to take this one? Dorothy, were you going to talk about this?
Yeah, I can talk about some of this, and I think Erin may have some things too.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, during the, whatever a typical time frame is, a non-pandemic time frame, there'd be a lot of opportunities for our children, and my son's 21 now, even at a college age, to interact with peers, and he's struggling with this as well. And so I will tell you, even as they get older, I mean, all of us struggle this. We're as adults struggling with this, but there are opportunities in a typical time frame where our kids could be involved in, like, maybe clubs that are in the community, maybe a Lego club, or like my son loves vintage cars, so he would get together with people like that. And that may not be possible. It depends on where you are and what the guidelines are for social distancing or other things. You may be able to do that through Zoom or other online platforms, and it's not optimum, but sometimes even if it's with a friend one-on-one, I know Hannah might have mentioned this, or Erin, one of them was saying that my daughter doesn't do well in like large groups anyway. And so if they could interact one-on-one with a friend, or a peer, even back to the educational component, is you could reach out to a teacher and say, is there a peer in his class or her class who could, like, they could do their schoolwork together or something like that, which would make it more fun. In high school, some of the students have to have community service. They could actually get credit for doing that, and helping a peer. So that's something they could also do. I know with homeschooling, a typical type homeschooling, there's lots of groups, homeschool co-ops that offer classes like woodworking, theater, dance, art. They are actually doing that online now. So that's another option. It's really difficult, and it's not optimum, but it is a possibility. So Erin, I think you might have some other suggestions for that.
Just slightly more like technologically based ones. So my daughter uses Facebook Messenger for kids all the time. Hannah was talking about how her daughter does really well if she can draw and then use pictures to communicate. This one has that has games built into it, drawing, guessing games, and like little games you can play with your friends, like tilt your head to run this way, and like it's fun. I know Netflix watch parties are a thing. You can set it up so it plays on everybody's screen simultaneously, and then you guys can like hang out on the phone and text or whatever. I know a lot of kids at school, my school, are doing that. And then video games are always that opportunity, if that's a thing in your house, to have them interact with peers and friends. So things like that. Also getting in touch with their friends' parents and just, can they have a video chat if they're younger and they don't have the availability to do that independently.
And this was the last question.
I was gonna say,
So
there's a couple of other ones that are coming in.
Yeah.
There was one that followed up to what Erin just said, which was talking about her son. You know, he misses his high school basketball team so much, and he feels disconnected. So he's great, and he's connected to video games. But then, what do you do when it gets to be too much with the video games? So how do you balance that without isolating him? Do you have any help with that?
I would love anyone else to chime in with the ideas there.
Yeah.
It's the challenge that I think that all of us are facing right now. How do you, and we're doing it right now, how do you interact with other people without using your phone or other technology?
Yeah, I have to share, like, my older daughter's a competitive swimmer, and having that was like the cornerstone of her mental health and her social life, because school was so hard for her. So having that pulled away has been a big blow. And I think for any student athlete, you know, or even if you weren't great, that was a social point of connection, it's really hard. Some coaches are still doing some type of support virtually, where they're doing like team meetings or kind of offering kind of like joint workouts, and some are doing nothing. And, you know, for the kids that are left with nothing, I ended up reaching out to 2 parents, and they're doing some video, you know, ab workouts, but it's not the same. And, you know, it's like, we're also, you know, had to go back to counseling, because some of the mental health issues came out more because we're not getting all the physical exercise, you know, and then also just looking at, are there ways like she's done some bike rides, you know, from a social distance with some of the swim team people, you know, with one person at a time, and something, but not great.
And I'll share that Tamara wrote, she said she's done group chats with her friends, you know, one-on-one, they've done some great, but then still ended up with a meltdown later in the day. So she just wanted to share that with us. Yeah. And I think, to me, that speaks to, we can do everything that we can do, and sometimes it's
not the same.
I was reading earlier about this whole thing is a grieving process for everyone. And I think that if we look at this as sometimes our kids processing the loss of what they're used to having, I think that's a useful way for me to frame some of the experiences we're having here. There is anger, there is sadness, there is the bargaining chip, like, well, if everybody does follow all the rules, then we can go back to school for the end of the year. And that's not happening. And they're gonna miss things like summer camp and all these other things. I think it is grief in a lot of ways. So that's just helped our household deal with it.
Yeah, I think introducing those words and framing it that way can be really helpful, just validating what a loss this is.
And I think it's an opportunity, also this interesting, the slide that's coming up about teaching life skills. I mean, some of the skills we're teaching our children now are not necessarily academic. I mean, even for my son, he had to take online classes. Actually, he's been online the entire semester this year because he had ankle surgery in December. He was supposed to go back in the middle of March, but he couldn't. And then there was times when he was really upset that he could. And I talked to him, it's like, I really wanted to go back and I can't do it. And so part of it was processing that loss and acknowledging, you know, this isn't what any of us want. Even as adults, there's things we're not allowed to do, but let's focus on what we can do. And then hopefully in time, you're going to be able to go back to that. But what can we do right now? Focus on, I said to him, what can you do right now? And finding things that he enjoyed, even though he couldn't do some things that really none of the rest of us could do either. But that's a life skill that all of us need. I mean, adults as well as children. Mm-hmm. So I thank Erin for bringing that up, because I think grief and loss is a huge thing at this point for pretty much everybody. It's everyone going through this together.
There's another question, and I think this would be a great discussion. How do you balance your special needs child's schoolwork with your other children? She said her XXY son requires 2 hours of her attention just to get his schoolwork done, and then she's drained. And then how do you find the energy to help your other kids' schoolwork?
I'm laughing because when I told my husband I was doing this, he cracked up laughing at me, because he said, we are like barely, you know, making it through each day. And I'm outing myself in that because I don't think anyone can be a robot or be a full, you know, like after working with a child with special needs for 2 hours, anyone, you know, it's really hard. When it's your own child, it's much harder because your emotional heartstrings are just all going because you're seeing, you know, how hard it is. And you may not be able, you can't do, one of our main points is you cannot do everything the way that you may want to, you know, or that you could do pre-pandemic. We can't. And so I would just say congratulations for having worked with the one child for 2 hours.
And I think just having time to spend individually with each kid that would be outside of a school setting, like outside of that educational component of your day, would be super important. Not even necessarily focusing on doing your homework.
Thank you. Here's another one. Our biggest challenge is when the negative emotions take over, and there's typically a period of unacceptable behaviors, hitting siblings, yelling, throwing, slamming doors. He wants me to help him calm down by rubbing his back, telling him everything's okay, but that seems to send the message that I approve of this behavior, not sure what I should do or say.
I always pause when it sounds like there's a lot of things going on with this particular scenario, where you have some extreme kind of emotional dysregulation, you know, probably expressing that something's too stressful or too hard or beyond, you know, your child's coping capabilities. And I also hear that you're not wanting to reinforce the behavior. And at the same time, it sounds like it's really clear what helps them calm down, which is the physical touch and reassurance. And so so I think we can say after and talk a little bit more, but I think that what behaviorally you'd want to do would be focusing on ways that we can see the signs early or kind of have a checkpoint early so that he can request getting the back rub and the reassurance before going to the hitting. So it'd be one of those conversations of like, hey, I see we're having big feelings and but then sometimes we're having hitting, and, you know, how can we check in sooner, you know, or how can we, because once the hitting's happened, it's almost like we're past the point where we'd want it to be. And so as much as we can check in sooner, the better.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Here's another question. Does anyone have a problem with the kids eating or a lack of interest with food and just wanting to sleep all day?
My kid would sleep all day if we let her. Absolutely. They're bored, and some of them are showing signs of depression.
Mm-hmm. That to me sounds like I would just want to monitor that, you know, I'd probably consult with a mental health person if this is new, just because lack of interest in food and wanting to sleep all day can be signs of depression, especially if you're like hearing more negative emotionality, like, or negative statements. It also could be boredom in a teenager, I don't know, you know, but lack of structure. But sometimes the lack of structure can lead kids, you know, coupled with the social isolation, can put kids more predisposed to depression into that kind of symptomology.
Thank you. And this one is about a teenager. She says, my son is in a course that he needs a ton of help. It's a computer-based program. They sent the program home, and this is Mary's question, just so she knows. Sent the program home, changed, and he tried it the first time, and it got lost and didn't save. The teacher is amazing and willing to call and help, but he refuses to even open it. He's an 11th grader.
Okay, so I would recommend talking to the teacher about what kind of, well, I don't know what kind of program it is. So is there another way for him to do his work? So can he access the program and then maybe type his answers on a Google Doc that saves every 10 seconds and submit the responses that way, or copy and paste them into the program, depending on what type of program it is. If it's like a design program, obviously something like that won't work. But if it's a text-based response, that might be a way to make sure the work does not get lost.
You said it's CAD.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was hoping it wasn't. I was like, shoot, design program. Yeah, I would have to, I think walking through it with the teacher, I know that he doesn't want to open it, but maybe if you sit there with him and talk with the teacher with him, and I know that's so much support for an 11th grade boy that he does not want, I'm going to bet. Not that it's too much to give him, but it's probably more than he'll want to receive. But I think maybe just doing that once just to make sure that you understand what's going on might work. Yeah, that's frustrating.
This is a big problem with like Google Forms too. If you don't hit submit, you lose everything. And a lot of kids all over the country and world are struggling with this right now.
Yeah. Just letting him know that you understand that he's frustrated, but maybe can we just try again one more time? Yeah.
Okay. So I know it's 5 o'clock my time, which means it's 8 o'clock your guys' time. So I think are there other questions before we formally close, but then stay on, but we'll stop recording?
There was just one more, and then we'll make this the last one. And as you said, you can stay up and eat. I think she says her son can't stop eating, right? So now the opposite. He's bored. He's feeling some bored, frustration about work. You know, how do we handle that?
So, Dorothy, did you have something to say?
Well, I think it's probably the other end of the spectrum of the not eating. I mean, my son, he's 21, but I mean, a lot of teenagers will go. I remember he used to go to the gym, and a guy worked with him, and he'd say, you know, typically kids will go through the teen phase where of course, they want to sleep all the time. And a lot of times they don't want to eat. I'm thinking, really? But on the other, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, my son's 6'3". He's like probably 160 pounds. So I'm thinking, don't you want to eat? But on the other side, they could eat. It could be the other side for the same reason, for anxiety or depression. In fact, he told me one day, and I kind of acknowledged it. He said, well, I like to eat these crackers because it makes me feel better when I get anxious. And so I'm like, okay. So at least he's noticing that. And these are some of I think we should look at it, and I call it reframing, is when we see these things, start saying, oh, this is the opportunity for me to teach my son, daughter, whatever, some skills, coping skills, so that when they're adult, hey, they can name, like Hannah said, they can name, or Erin, name the emotion, validate it. This, you know, other people feel the same way. Like I told my son, yeah, other people feel upset too about they can't do what they normally do. But what can you do? And so I think, you know, this could be part of the anxiety depression. I don't know for sure. Every child's different. It depends on whether that's something that's been seen before. I think it gets more complicated once you get into the puberty age, because hormones are in there. But I think staying connected, I think that's the main thing that I saw during the teen years with my son, and even now, is staying connected. And acknowledging their feelings, or asking them, you know, I've noticed, like Hannah said, I've noticed that you did this or that, and tell me about that. How are you feeling? I tell my son my own story. Well, you know, I'm, like I said to him, I'm frustrated too that we're having to stay home. I mean, I can't go out and do things I want to do either. And it's frustrating, but I'm trying to focus on what I can do and not what I can't. As far as controlling the eating, I don't know if Hannah, I don't know if you have suggestions for that, but maybe having mainly really healthy food if they want to eat a lot. I don't know, but with teenagers, that's a challenge anyway. So at least I can't go out and eat junk food, but if you have it in your home, then you can at least offer something that's healthy if they're going to eat. Hannah, do you have anything about that as far as?
So I would just echo what you said. You know, what we see is that, you know, increase or decrease in appetite can be related to depression. It also can be related to just, you know, we've heard emotional eating. So just trying to like calm your body down or just fill some need, right? Boredom eating. Everyone has different triggers of eating. I'm definitely seeing this with my teenager also. For her, sometimes it seems like it's work avoidance. What we see also is that there's an increase when there's impulsivity issues already. Sometimes people that have a hard time inhibiting their impulse to grab and touch things might also do that with food when it's around. And so, yeah, we'd want to just be thinking about the environment and what's around, and having healthy things that are grabbable always is an option, but we also just can't control this for our kids. And, you know, we can have conversations and try not to judge because we're human. Yeah.
I think is that everybody?
I just want to add one plug on that because I am a registered dietitian, so I might suggest that they might see if their insurance would cover a couple of visits with a registered dietitian. Sometimes having somebody else do the talking about it is better than the parent, right? We've all had that.
That's why we take our child to therapy.
Exactly. I think a lot of you have mentioned it, and I think that's the other thing is you know, if you can access therapy, I'm sure other therapists are really busy now because it's really helpful.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are there any announcements before we stop the recording? And then we'll stay on for a few minutes if people want to ask any
Off the record
questions.
And just to let everyone know that we're going to send out the resources list. We'll also be posting this recording. We've had a couple requests for us to do more meetings like this, and to let you know that as an organization, AXYS, we're finding this very successful. So whether it's this topic or different groups, watch your email, and we'll be planning these and announcing them. So thank you everyone who came. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so I guess we can stop recording now.
Yes.
Whoever has that button.
I see it.